in Iran and the United States and possible talks until just moments ago when Israel's prime minister gave an interview throwing cold water on the situation and laying out a time frame for a strike. In a late interview in Tel Aviv with Israeli TV's Channel 2, Benjamin Netanyahu said this.
I am not standing with a stopwatch in hand. It is not a matter of days or weeks, but also not a matter of years. Everybody understands this.
Now, this is his first interview since visiting with President Obama, and it confirms what we reported on this show, which is that President Obama had delayed Israel's plans to strike Iran this spring, but had not stopped them. Netanyahu's words, of course, leaves the extremely political sensitive U.S. election time frame purposefully wide open for an Israeli strike. But on a day when the U.S. and Europeans have agreed to go back to the negotiating table with Iran, the Israeli news is a splash of cold water, proving Israel is not backing down on trying to force a quote-unquote window. Now, talks with Iran have failed since 2009, due in part to the West's insistence that all Iran's nuclear activities be on the table, including enriching uranium for nuclear power, which Iran insists is the only goal of its nuclear program. And it is something the Iranian ambassador to the IAEA told me recently Iran will, quote, never, ever suspend. Now, there was one other unexpected thing that happened today, and this was really fascinating. Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, praised President Obama, who cited a, quote, window of opportunity to resolve the standoff over Iran's nuclear program diplomatically. The Ayatollah told a group of clerics, quote, this expression is a good word. This is a wise remark, indicating talking distance from illusion. Sources tell CNN's Elise Labat that Khamenei may be seriously worried about a military attack or about the United States crippling sanctions, and so he's trying to make an overture to the president. It all leads us to ask, is it possible for a major breakthrough between Iran and the West? Out front tonight, David Albright. He's a former UN's weapons inspector and president for the Institute for Science and International Security. Hooman Majd, who wrote the provocative New York Times op-ed this weekend entitled Starving Iran Will Not Free It. And the Iranian-American journalist is also author of The Ayatollah Begs to Differ. And, of course, with us, Jamie Rubin, former Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs. Okay, great to have all of you with us. Hooman, let me start with you. What the Ayatollah said about President Obama. What was he really saying?
Well, I think he was allowing for there to be some room for negotiations. I think it was a clear indication from Iran that negotiations is their preference. They want to negotiate. They've indicated that for a long time, by the way. They constantly say, we won't negotiate under threats. And when you start stepping back from that threat of war, that's an opening as far as Iran's concerned. I think the Ayatollah wanted to signal that, and he's in charge. It's not President Ahmadinejad. He's the one who's in charge. He's the one who's going to make decisions on Iran's nuclear program, and he was just signaling that they are open as long as these threats are stepped back from.
Jamie, do you think that there will be talks and will there be breakthroughs, especially with this whole issue of quote-unquote preconditions? I mean, it makes a lot of sense that Iran would say, get out of my business if I want to have nuclear power. Right? A lot of countries have nuclear power. Why should that be a precondition?
I don't think the U.S. has denied Iran the right to nuclear power. I think there's a lot of smoke being thrown in people's eyes right now. Let's start with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The Israelis very much want the world to be talking about the possibility of a military strike. They believe and have said very candidly, the more that seems real to Iran, the greater the chance that this can be resolved without it. Secondly, Ayatollah Khamenei clearly is worried about sanctions and clearly likes President Obama, they've said from the beginning, personally. And so when President Obama was talking very disparagingly about Republicans and others who were talking of war, it suits the Ayatollah to praise President Obama for that. As far as a breakthrough is concerned, it's going to require some hard things from the United States that we've never been prepared to do, and hard things from the Iranians.
What do we have to do?
We have to accept a deal that's less than a complete ending of Iranian enrichment. And the Iranians will have to find a way, diplomatically or openly, to admit that some programs occurred in the past that were military in nature, because that's what the inspectors are going to try to determine. And until they've gotten to the bottom of those pieces of evidence, the world will not be satisfied that this program is only of a peaceful nature.
And David, that brings me to you as a former UN weapons inspector. What do you make of what you've heard in recent days from the IAEA, which has been very clear in saying it is not sure that there have been indications the program is for military uses, and that just yesterday yesterday started talking about one of the key sites they've been denied access to, the Parchin site, being quote-unquote cleaned up.
Well, the IA is very worried. I mean, the evidence they have is pretty compelling that Iran had a nuclear weapons program in the past that may be ongoing, and so they want to get to the bottom of it, and Iran has just not cooperated. And I think what Jamie said is very important. It's really essential that Iran start to what we would call start coming clean about its past nuclear weapons activities. I mean, no one's saying they're building a bomb now or have decided to build a bomb now, but they need to start coming clean and restoring their credibility. Frankly, they're seen as being disassemblers on just basic issues involving past nuclear activities. And if they would take that step forward, I don't think they would be punished. I think they would be welcomed for it, and it's a step that several countries in the past did, and it turned out to be the way forward to a solution. Whether Iran will do that, I don't know. What they've done in the last several days in Vienna at the International Atomic Energy Agency Board of Governors meeting makes me think they're not ready to do that, and we're headed for a very difficult negotiation.
And Hooman, go ahead.
We never ask whether the Iranians are telling the truth. What if they didn't have a nuclear program, a nuclear weapons program? David and other people tend to ignore that. What if they are telling the truth? What if that laptop that everybody talks about at the IA has this laptop that Iran for years has said is a forgery, is a fake? What if that's true, that it's a fake? How do you prove a negative? I mean, that's a situation we had in Iraq. How do you prove a negative? I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do.
It's not at all a negative. Sorry, it's not at all a negative. I was very much involved in debunking many of the claims about Iraq. Iran is no Iraq.
You were the one who was saying before the Iraq invasion that they definitely had chemical and biological weapons.
I'm sorry, I was talking about their nuclear program.
But thinking
and I was talking about their nuclear program.
Thinking something is kind of like, it's a little dangerous, isn't it?
What we're seeing here, Aaron, is an important debate, and it's important because last time the United States did make a mistake. They went to war on the premise of weapons of mass destruction, and that hangs heavy over the world's perceptions of the United States. And that's why I think it is important for us to do this by the book, using the Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA's work, the UN's work, and saying that once those peaceful intentions have been confirmed, that we, the United States, are prepared to make our concessions. And that means lifting sanctions. That means figuring out a way so that Iran doesn't want to have nuclear weapons because its security isn't threatened. That's stuff that we haven't really been prepared to do or talk about openly. We need to do that if we want to avoid what President Obama said, which is the risks and dangers of using military force
Well, it does
again.
seem, at least rhetorically, that it's been talked into a situation where there is a window, and if there isn't resolution, someone's going to be forced to, well, do what they said or never be trusted again. If that's Israel, I mean, people, can see how they might go. But David, what do they need? What does Iran need to do to have the world trust them that whatever they did or didn't do is done, and they're not doing anything? What do they have to do?
Well, one is, I mean, the IAEA's looked at this information for a long term. It's not about proving a negative at all. In fact, there's very positive evidence that the IAEA wants to talk to Iran about, and since 2008, Iran has refused to talk about it. And during the last week, what they did is they further told the IAEA that they were going to remove whole areas that they would not talk about. And that concerns what we call procurement. Efforts by Iran to buy things overseas, or the actual buying of things overseas, and then that information shows that something has gone on that Iran is not telling the truth about. And the IA wants to go there and talk to them, and now they're starting to remove whole areas. And so that's why I'm a little worried. Now, what I hope is the Supreme Leader will intervene and will overturn this situation that was done in Vienna and start to talk openly about their program with the inspectors. And remember, the inspectors are the ones who were able to get to the bottom of the whole question on Iraq's WMD and raise serious questions about that before the invasion, and particularly on the nuclear. And so to now turn on them and say, well, somehow they're disassembling, that the inspectors, I think is disingenuous, that the inspectors have been the ones that have done the honest job to try to figure things out. They said there isn't much there in the case of Iraq. They're saying there is something there in the case of Iran.
I think what we can't expect, and this is the hardest thing for people as well-intentioned and expert as David to appreciate, it's very hard for a country to say they lied. And so we need to figure out a way where information can be provided, where evidence can be provided, where answers can be given that are not in the context of they're not telling the truth. Now they admitted they lied. Countries don't like to admit they lied.
Well, you know what rule number 1 is on this show? We'll leave it at this. Everybody lies. Everybody, all right? So we all have. You can confess, except for the 3 that are here tonight, all right? All right. Okay, well, there's a lot more to come on. Pretty excited about